The Holy Gospel according to the 4th chapter of Luke. Then Jesus began to say to all in the synagogue in Nazareth, "Today, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. They said, "Is this not Joseph's son?" He said to them, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself.' And you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown the things that we have heard you did at Capernaum.' And he said, 'Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was severe famine all over the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them except to the widow at Zarephath in Sidon. There were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian." When they heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage. They got up, drove him out of town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But Jesus passed through the midst of them and went on his way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
You may be seated. All right, kids and grown-ups, we're going to have a little fun with the movie Frozen 2. I think this takes the rank as my favorite Disney movie. So for those of you who have seen the movie, I'd like you to turn to someone in your pew and tell them what your favorite part of the movie is. Maybe it's a favorite character, a favorite song, a favorite scene. You have 1 minute to share your favorite part of the movie. Go.
You got the clip.
Okay, so that's a bit of fun, right? There's some good stuff in this movie. I think at the heart of why I love this movie so much is that it is a call story. Both Elsa and Anna are called to share their gifts and do what is right. And ultimately, it is this wonderful act of love that they do. In the Bible, we have stories, different stories of when God calls someone to do something. In fact, in our reading today that was just read, it was the call story of Jeremiah. Jeremiah was a prophet. And when God called him, Jeremiah was probably a teenager. So when God asked Jeremiah to be a prophet, Jeremiah says, "But I'm only a boy." He's surprised that God is calling him to do such a difficult job. After all, prophets were called to tell people kind of like what they're doing wrong and how they're messing up. That was the prophet's job. So that wasn't always an easy thing to do. For Jeremiah, he had this journey into the unknown, right? That might sound a little bit like Elsa. She had a journey into the unknown. Well, before we get to Elsa, a little bit more about Jeremiah. When he gets this call, he wants to get out of it. He says, "I don't know how to speak. I'm only a boy." And maybe this was an excuse, Or maybe he really just didn't believe in himself that he could do this great thing that God was calling him to do. But still, it is God who wants Jeremiah. And so God promises that God will be with Jeremiah and that God will give him the words he needs and the gifts he needs to live out this call. So that's an example of a call story. For Elsa, she also has a call story. She literally had this voice calling, right? It called to her, woke her up in the night. It called her into this future unknown. And at first she says she tries to push it away. She ignores it. She's a little bit afraid. She doesn't want to follow this voice. Afraid of that risk, but it keeps calling her. So then, of course, when the Spirit calls and the elemental spirits show up and the people of Arendelle have to escape, Elsa and Anna are led on this journey, that voice still calling into the future. And they are set with this task of freeing the people in the enchanted forest, both the people of North Uldra and the Arendellian soldiers that have been stuck there for generations. So Elsa follows this voice, and we know she ends up at Atahallan, right? On this glacial river. She's following the voice. She's singing this song, Show Yourself, wanting this voice to show herself. But in the end, the voice, who is her mother, turns and says, no, show yourself. She says that to Elsa. You're the one you've been waiting for. There's this sense that these gifts have been put in her. She's been created for this purpose. And this voice says, show yourself. Her call is to live her true self, this elemental spirit that holds things together. So that piece of Elsa's story reminds me again of Jeremiah, the prophet I was just talking about. God tells Jeremiah, I made you in your mama's belly. I formed you. I loved you even before you were born. God tells Jeremiah, I have made you special for this task. God gave Jeremiah the exact gifts he needed to live out his call. Just like Elsa had gifts in her, who she was, so she could live out her call. So kids and grown-ups, you are called too. You are also called. We could be called to a whole bunch of different things. You could be called to be a teacher, a firefighter, a doctor, an artist, an engineer, maybe a really good boss, a mom, a dad, a Sunday school teacher, boy, a whole bunch of things. You are also called. Now, some of our grown-ups in the room have had an opportunity to live out these calls, but maybe some of our kids, you don't quite know what that could be or what that looks like yet, but it's in you. God made you in your mama's belly, and God made you special, giving you these unique gifts that are especially yours. So I'm going to give us another little task here. The parents have been prepped for this. I'd like parents to tell their kids what you see is special in your children. What special gifts has God given your kids? What do you see in them? So go ahead and tell them. If you have your card you prepared for them, you can hand them their card. I'll give you a minute to do that. And any of y'all grown-ups can do this for one another as well, as I'm sure you see gifts in each other. All right. Well, each one of us has been wonderfully and marvelously made. Now, our parents prepared little cards for the kids. Kids, can you stand up just where you're at and point your card to me so I can see what gifts your parents said you have? Okay, you can go ahead and stand up if you would. And let's see what gifts we have out here. I see artistic, and kind, and funny. Oh, considerate, focused, lovable, and clever, imaginative, helpful. Oh, there's so many good ones. Can you tell me what? Oh, huggable. That's great. Athletic, a sense of curiosity and being kind and helpful. If I've read yours, you guys can sit down again over here. Okay, what is Isabel? Imaginative, responsible, honest, respectful, compassionate, being creative, being your true self. I love that. Making friends, helping people. Margaret, ooh, storytelling. I like that. It's very cool. And Autumn has kind, helpful, dependable. So there were other gifts on these cards, but these were just a few of the ways that God has wonderfully made you. And God calls you as well to use these gifts to love and bless others. That's really beautiful and amazing to see those things and know those things about each of you. So now here's the question. What exactly are we called to do? Maybe we kind of get that we might be called, but what is that about? What are we called to do? And that is to love. Jesus gives the disciples and all of us the greatest commandment to love one another. And in our readings today, we heard that no matter what we do, if we don't have love, it doesn't count for much at all. It's love that makes whatever we do the special thing to bless the world. And if you remember in the movie, this is also one of my favorite parts. Remember when Olaf says, I know there's one thing that's permanent. What does he say is permanent? Do you remember? Love. Is that what you're going to say too, Ella? Yeah, love is permanent. And that's just what we heard in our scripture reading. It says that love never ends. For Jeremiah, the prophet that I was talking about earlier, he had to tell the people of God that they weren't following God's ways, that they weren't being loving. He had to tell them that they were forgetting about those who were most vulnerable, the ones who were hurting. He had to tell them a hard truth that, you know, you're kind of failing at love. But that was an act of love on Jeremiah's part to tell that truth and call the people back to God's ways. Now, I think Anna and Elsa also had a really hard task that also had to do with love. In their pursuit to free the people in the enchanted forest, they had to search for truth. And in the end, they had to face the hard truth that it was their grandfather that started the whole fight and war that ended the people in this trapped in this enchanted forest. They had to look at their history and they saw, wait, cruelty was part of our history. And so they seek to make that right. They seek to do the next right thing, righting a past wrong. They sought justice, and in the end, they freed all the people of in the enchanted forest, and they even brought freedom for themselves. Now, as Anna said, she didn't always know what to do, but she said she had that mantra, just to do the next right thing. And that led her along the way. God calls us into the unknown, and that can feel risky, and we might be afraid. But God promises to always be with us, just as he told Jeremiah And we can trust that too as we live out our call to love. And maybe that happens in big ways and small ways, in gentle ways, and ways that sometimes are really difficult. But God goes with us into the unknown, giving us just the gifts we need to live out this call, to love and to serve. And God leads us to do that next right thing, which one way or another always comes back to love. Thanks be to God.